Hello and welcome to the David Kurten Show here on today's News Talk TNT. Now, today, the unelected Foreign Secretary of the UK, David Cameron, has weighed in on an African country, condemning Uganda for what they are doing in their own parliament. Now, in May 2023, they passed what was called an anti-homosexuality act, the purpose of which mainly was to protect children from the extreme activism by Western LGBT groups who were trying to get into the political process in Uganda and push and promote LGBT ideologies onto the country and onto the children as well, of course. Some of the foreign aid, which was going into Uganda as into other African countries by Western governments, was conditional upon being tied to them implementing LGBT policies. Now, President Museveni of Uganda and the Ugandan parliament had enough of that, so they passed this act last year. But David Cameron yesterday weighed in on this because there was a court ruling about the bill this week and just yesterday, actually. What he said was this: the Ugandan Anti-Homosexuality Act has increased violence and discrimination against LGBT plus people. I'm deeply concerned Uganda continues to roll back human rights. The UK will continue to stand up for a world where people are free from persecution regardless of their sexuality. Now, whether this is true or not, I don't know, because we have a lot of LGBT NGOs who are active and they are pushing the narrative that since this bill was brought in, there has been an increase in violence. That's according to them. It's not necessarily the truth. But certainly what this is a new kind of colonialism. We have Western elites always talking up that what the Western nations did in the era of slavery back in the 18th century and how terrible it was. And it was bad. But this is neocolonialism, pushing what are called modern values, modern Western values onto African countries. They're not traditional Western values, traditional British Christian values. They're new values of the globalists, and LGBT is one of those things. Now, there is no doubt that this law is quite harsh. There is 20 years in jail for promotion of homosexuality. So Uganda is very much following the path of Russia, which is seeking to do the same thing to protect its children. This is the opposite of what's happening in Western countries, where we have introduced in the UK and around the West relationships and sex education to the very youngest of children. It's part of the UN's program of comprehensive sexuality education, where horrendous materials are going into classrooms in schools. Uganda, Ghana, and other African countries want none of that, and they don't want promotion of homosexuality in their media, on the internet, on advertising boards, just as Russia and Hungary have banned those things as well. Here in the UK, you can't really switch on your television without having diversity thrust in your face in all its ugly and degenerate forms. The act also does give life imprisonment for same-sex acts, if you like. Now, that is a little bit harsh, admittedly. I do agree with the Wolfenden report from the 1950s in the UK that decriminalized what people do in the privacy of their own homes. But since then, in the West, LGBT activists and the movements have continually sought to increase the amount of LGBT that we get in our society, from just being left alone to changing the definition of marriage, to putting it into schools, and now to banning and criminalizing anybody who says something against LGBT ideologies, either with hate speech laws or with this idea of banning conversion therapy. New Zealand has introduced a law last year to ban conversion therapy, which means that parents who try to de-radicalize or deprogram children who have gone to school and who come home saying that I'm a girl when they're a boy or I'm a boy when they're a girl would find themselves subject to being arrested by the police and maybe put in prison for trying to convert their children from being transgender to being normal people who think that they are the biological sex that they are, even if they have been radicalized in school by LGBT activists. That's the path that we're on. So this is a harsh law, but I think that it's been put in place in response to the aggressive promotion of LGBT in Uganda by Western NGOs who have tied aid to Uganda to the program, to accepting the program, and are trying to convert children into LGBT lifestyles against the wishes of the vast majority of people in African countries. This is what David Cameron has said. I disagree with it. He's entitled to his opinion, but I certainly would say that what they're doing in Uganda to protect children from these ideologies is a very good thing. This is today's News Talk, TNT.
Clashing on the controversies.
It's a woke society, and I am fed up with it.
Today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
You're watching the David Kurten Show on today's News Talk, TNT, and Gemma Cooper is here to talk about the latest in the UK news headlines. Welcome to the show, Gemma.
Thank you, David. Just hearing you talk about that story then, I thought colonialism had gone away, where we steam into other countries and tell them how to implement policies and what to do, you know, where the white man goes in and tells the black man what to do. You know, colonialism, wasn't that like generations ago? Sounds like it's still going on to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's supposed to have gone away, isn't it? But this is the irony. You have people, especially, well, I mean, I was going to say on the left, but, you know, there is no real difference to the political parties now that call themselves right and left, the fake Conservatives and Labour. They are all woke to some extent, and woke people, woke culture condemns slavery and condemns colonialism. But we have this new kind of woke colonialism, which is trying to impose LGBT and climate alarmism, if you like, and all these other things, these ideologies that don't make any scientific sense on African nations, Middle Eastern nations, Asian nations. And they're actually standing up against this, you know, and they're actually pointing out this is a kind of neocolonialism. And it's completely wrong for David Cameron or anybody else in the UK or anybody else in the West to try to impose almost the new religion of LGBT on, you know, Uganda, what is a profoundly Christian country, because a lot of the African countries, sub-Saharan countries, are profoundly Christian, and that's their culture, and they don't want this. So it's completely wrong to try to impose this on African countries.